Hello and welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck and today I'll be talking about what all I will be reading for the Zodiacathon. As far as I know, it's a reading challenge that happens every year and they base it around one of your zodiac signs. This year they're doing it based off of your Lilith sign. I wasn't familiar with what a Lilith sign was before kind of looking into this challenge. I know very basic like sun, moon, rising kind of astrology, but not very much past that, so I thought that I would look to see kind of what my Lilith sign was and what that even means to begin with. And what I found was that my Lilith sign is Pisces, which is the same as my sun sign, which I thought was a little bit weird, but I don't really know necessarily how the stars work. I'm guessing that since I'm a 0 degrees Pisces, maybe like the rest of it is wherever Lilith is supposed to be. I really don't know, but I'm going to defer to the astrologers of the internet. One website that I found said that people with a Lilith and Pisces have a fascination with self-sacrifice and blending into others, and as a type 9 on the Enneagram, I feel attacked. But it also says that Lilith gives these people the ability to feel connected with everything, even their deepest thoughts and cosmic soul. These people are often midwives, prophets, and wise men or women. However, they may also perceive life as suffering and succumb to various dubious, mystical ways that they believe bring mysterious abilities or heal people. I don't really know what to make of that. I am in my head a whole lot, and I cry a lot, but I thought that was just because I was a Pisces sun and Aquarius moon, and being stuck in your own head while also being emotional kind of makes sense. According to good old Astro Cafe with its birth chart, it says that people with Lilith and Pisces may have felt ashamed or off for being needy, compassionate, or wishy-washy for their spiritual side, and this person can feel uncomfortable or annoyed with people who resist labels, who are not very assertive, or ready to take the lead. Denying these very human traits in themselves can lead to extreme behaviors. Self-acceptance and integration of these traits and moderation can be empowering. I've got to say, none of this is technically wrong, because I definitely do feel bad for feeling wishy-washy or feeling too much a lot of the time. And I would say, most of the time I don't feel like mad at people for not being assertive, but then again, the reaction that I had to the main character in Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens for being like that might indicate otherwise, so who knows. But now that we know kind of what my Lilith sign is, I can't say I understand anymore. If any bigger astrology gays than I have more input, please put it down below. So now I'm going to actually get into the books that I will be reading. Now the thing you have to know about this book list is that I may not get through all of them for this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about each of these books in order of priority, or probably in the order that I'm going to be reading them. Some of these books cover more than one challenge, so hopefully I can still get through this having done something that completes each challenge. Ideally, I'd like to read a book for each challenge. So I've got a TBR, but whether or not I'm going to totally finish it is a little bit up in the air. But we're going to cross our fingers and hope. So the first book that I'm focusing on is A Blade So Black by J.J. McKinney. I'm going to be buddy reading this with a lovely person that I found on the Zodiacathon's Twitter page. I'm not totally sure if they're okay with being mentioned in a YouTube video, but if they are okay with it, I will be putting their information in the description below. A Blade So Black is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland that's a little bit more modern. That's basically all the information that I have on the book. It sounded interesting. This also technically fits the reading challenge that they put up for people whose Lilith is in Pisces, and that is to read a book that takes place not in our world. I definitely think that Wonderland is not of our world. The next book that I will be reading and prioritizing for this readathon is Moving Politics, Emotion, and ACT UP's Fight Against AIDS. This one is hefty. I'm putting this as number 2 right now, but depending on how much I feel like reading nonfiction, I may put this slightly towards the end just because I might want to get through more books, but maybe that's silly. This book looks at the development of ACT UP and kind of the role that emotion plays, and how it also led to some of the pitfalls in the group, I think. It looks super interesting, and I'm excited about it. This book fits in with reading challenge number 3, which is to read a book with a mostly black cover. I think that it also fits reading challenge number 4, which is to read a book with dark themes. So the next book in this stack that I have is The Gilda Stories by Jewelle Gomez. This is a gay vampire story with people of color. That's basically all that I know about this. The little bit that I read online said that it kind of questioned the typical assumption about vampires in that they like lose morality, so maybe one of the characters in here is kind of not living up to that trope, and because of that spin kind of on morality, I thought that it might cover prompt number 6, which is to read a book with a morally gray character, because this character doesn't fit the typical bill. Maybe there will be a morally gray character to go beside her. I don't know, because I haven't read the book, which makes prompt number 6 really difficult. Sometimes you don't know if there's a morally gray character if you haven't read the book. If it's not super popular and on all the Goodreads lists, it's hard to really get it. If it doesn't fit with number 6, it can definitely go with number 5, because vampires are scary. So there we go. Next, I have The Midwinter Witch by Molly Osertag. This is the 3rd installment of the Witch Boy series. This is a super adorable series. It's got like a trans allegory that goes on through the whole thing. I really adore it, but it's gone in a slightly dark direction. Really the whole time there is this discussion of like bad magic or dark magic, and I think this one kind of explores that a little bit more. Sort of hard to say because I haven't read the book yet. So I am saying that this book will probably line up with prompt number 4, which is to read something with dark themes. If not, I would say this cover is mostly dark, so it can go along with that one as well. Additionally, with the dark magic and stuff like that, that kind of brings morally gray characters, so that would probably fit with it as well. The next book that I have is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursela Le Guin. This one is definitely one that will fit for the Pisces prompt, which again was to read something that's out of this world. I don't know if it'll fit any of the other prompts, but I really wanted to read this. I don't really know a whole ton about it. I know that a lot of Ursela Le Guin's books hit on a lot of different queer themes, so I've really wanted to read her. This is basically like a space novel where the main character is going somewhere else in space to investigate. I think that the main character has like a more fluid gender, and a lot of the same kind of prejudices against that kind of stuff aren't apparent on the planet that he's taking over. So I'm not really sure what happens, but it sounds cool, and I've wanted to read it. So there you have it. This next book, I really honestly don't know if I'm going to be getting to, but in the ideal world I would. If I don't finish it within this week, I will definitely be bringing it to the Queer Lit Readathon weekend, which happens right after this, and that is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I honestly don't know how I haven't read this yet, because it was described to me as gay Harry Potter, and that's really the only thing that I think I need in my life. This technically fits because it's got a morally gray character in there, according to the internet, and since it's a fantasy novel, it also technically fits in with Pisces. So, depending on, I guess, my feelings, I may end up reading this before the Ursela Le Guin. We'll just see how it goes. I think I'm going to vlog my way through this reading challenge, and this is the first time that I have really vlogged as I've read before, so we'll see how this goes. Thus far, I've got to say I haven't been doing very good. I ended up just doing a whole bunch of school stuff yesterday, and yesterday was the first day of the challenge. I've gotten up through chapter 4 on the first book, so that's progress at least. But these next few days I won't be doing too terribly much because of the whole social isolation thing, so I'll probably have a lot of time to read. We'll see how it goes. So it is the 21st, which is day 3 of the readathon, day 2 of me doing it. It is the morning though, so there's still a lot of today left, but I am on chapter 6, or I just finished chapter 6 last night of A Blade So Black. I'm waiting on my buddy reader before I go further, but I'm still not 100% on how I feel about it. I do really like the integration of that kind of intense fantasy along with the real life situations. So I do like that they're hitting on some of the issues that they're hitting on, but I'm not really sure how much I like the romance that they've added. I feel like they've shoehorned in 2 different romances, and I personally am not a fan of most love triangles. so we'll see how this goes. I'm about to start a little bit of moving politics this morning. So yeah. Oh, and I wanted to point this out during my intro vlog, but since the theme is dark, I intentionally wore my Weeping Angel shirt. So I thought that was appropriate. But yeah, I'm gonna get some kind of something caffeinated, read some, and let you know how it goes. What day of the week is it even? Does anybody know? I sure don't. It is technically Sunday morning, but I would be more inclined to call it Saturday night. I thought I would update. I've been mostly focusing on getting into moving politics. I've also been reorganizing my bookcase, as you can maybe see in the background. Hopefully there's a video of that up before this comes out. And I am really enjoying moving politics. I've only gotten through the intro so far, so that is very small piece of the way through. It is page 47 out of, 444 pages. So it's going to take me a while to get through this. There is a fair amount that's more dense. This is definitely an academic text. I'm pretty sure this is someone's dissertation that was turned into a book, or at the very least some other kind of academic project, because they mention, I think board members or academic things towards the beginning of the text, and it's very clearly written as an academic text. So a lot of this is really theory heavy. However, when they focus on the history, the way that they talk about it, their kind of coverage and storytelling of it is really engaging. There are pieces of it so far, just through the intro, where they've put in their own experiences, and that is really well written, and the way that they integrated is done very well. But a lot of what the introduction focused on was the framework that they're going to use for looking at this specific social movement. They're looking at it in terms of emotion and affect. So basically emotions that they're aware of and can talk about, and then affect, which is emotions that you're feeling but you might not necessarily articulate or be able to articulate. And it's talking about how those emotions and affect impact social movements, and social movements can also impact your affect or your emotions. And that is super fascinating, but most sciences, and even within social sciences, a lot of people tend to downplay the role that emotion can play, and there's sort of this dichotomy of emotion and rationality, which is something that they hit on within this text, and that's kind of a false dichotomy. So I really love this idea of doing this deep dive into specifically the roles that emotions are going to play within this. I would love to see more people kind of look into more modern movements in that regard too, especially because some of the movements that you see that are more resistant to change have this mentality. There's the phrase, facts don't care about your feelings, or different things like that. So they're very invested in this dichotomy. So it would be interesting to see what role emotion plays within that particular group of people, especially considering the fact that they aren't really in tune. So it would definitely be more focused on, at least what Gould would call affect, rather than emotions that they're actually acknowledging. Anyways, that's a tangent. That is not what the book is about. It's about the emotional aspect, but they're looking at it in terms with ACT UP. And the bulk of the intro is focused on framework, but she does start out the book talking about ACT UP, and then it kind of puts in little bits and pieces towards the end of the intro. She gets into it more. Really, one of the things that really drew me in was when she talked about it at the beginning. The second subsection that she has in here on page 6 is when your data make you cry. She goes in and she actually talks about the emotional impact that all of this has on her. She was actually active in ACT UP, so it is very personal, and she did know people who died from HIV and was fighting for them. So that brings a huge emotional layer to it, and she talks about it openly, which is really the best thing that you can do when you're studying something. First of all, like as a scientist, I think that it's better to be open and honest, because when you pretend like you don't have emotions, you don't talk about them, that's kind of when you create things that are biased without realizing it. But also, I think that in general, emotions aren't talked about nearly as much as they need to be in terms of researchers' emotions. And this is something that I've talked about a whole lot because I do research with a group that I'm a part of. My research focuses on the LGBT community. And while her research is definitely, obviously going to be an emotional topic, because it's about an illness, my research isn't necessarily inherently emotional. I'm focused on language and how people use language. But within the interviews, people still end up revealing a lot of different things about themselves. People talked about having horrendously homophobic and transphobic family members, talking about even problems within the community where they feel isolated, and other sort of negative emotional things that they've dealt with, mental health problems. And as somebody who's a part of that group, I can personally relate to some of it. And outside of that work, even before I was in grad school, I did a whole lot for the Transgender Day of Remembrance event that we were doing as a student group, as a part of the LGBT group I was in. I was the person who was researching names. And throughout the summer, I found over 1,000 people. So needless to say, that was a huge kind of emotional burden, and it happened the same summer that the Pulse shooting happened. So the fact that she pointed that out at all really resonated with me. Within that section, she also goes into detail on kind of the different emotions that she experienced firsthand and how upfront the emotions when she was actually in the event were different than afterwards. That's not something that I personally experienced because I've never been in the position that she is. But again, that's just the intro, so I know that there's going to be way more nuance and detail in it. Really, I'm probably not doing the best job at summarizing this. Then she goes through and talks about a lot of the heavy theoretical stuff. At the end of the intro, she talks about kind of the importance of acknowledging this history and talking about the significance in who is telling the story. And that is key in the gender studies class that I teach. I really try to hammer home who's the person writing the history, whose perspectives are we hearing from. And I really loved a lot of the ways that she talked about that. Also the significance of having the history itself. And with the HIV/AIDS epidemic, this is one of the things that I am going out of my way to try to learn more about because I just never learned anything about it. The closest thing to any kind of education on the HIV/AIDS epidemic that I had was when we would bring people in to do sex education at the LGBT club. And then, even then, they would, be talking about HIV and how not to get it and stuff like that, but there wouldn't be necessarily as much acknowledgement of the movement itself. But as I'm looking into it more, I started with documentaries and then kind of went from there, but it's almost like the more I learn, the more angry I get that I didn't learn it in the first place. And I think that's something that I'm finding that's true with LGBT history in general, and also details within the civil rights movement and various racial justice movements in general. People aren't talking about them, despite the fact that it is so essential for history not to repeat itself, and so that a lot of the people who did all of that didn't do it in vain in a lot of ways. I think that there's a lot of important stuff that can come from recognition. I'm going to read a quote from this particular part of the chapter. It's on page 45. "What we lose if the history of AIDS activism in this country is forgotten is the memory of a government of a wealthy, ostensibly democratic country unmoved by the deaths of hundreds, thousands, and finally hundreds of thousands of its own inhabitants, largely because the overwhelming majority of them were gay and bisexual men, and the others were similarly expendable, drug users as well as poor men and women, a disproportionate numbers of whom were Black and Latina." That quote, just for me, carried a lot of meaning, especially, I think, the fact that I've been looking at HIV and AIDS activism. Certain things like that have a larger weight than they did before. So, this book is going to be interesting. I definitely think that it's going to be engaging so far as reading comprehension goes, because parts of it are a little bit dense, but it's broken up enough that I know that the whole way through isn't going to be as dense as the harsh theoretical kind of stuff. The that was part of the intro. But it's also going to be very emotional. It's going to be hard, but it's sort of refreshing to be able to have those side by side. We'll see how that goes.
All right, so it is about 10 o'clock on the 22nd. The time that I have spent reading today, I've been working on A Blade So Black. Not really sure there's a whole lot I can say without being sort of spoilery, but overall it just seems very rushed. I think that, I'm not sure, I've probably already said this already, but it almost feels like it needed like an extra few chapters beforehand or something. I know that there was the prologue and there was the bit of the year before that they talked about, but the relationships that they have building aren't necessarily compelling to me. And I'm having kind of a little bit of a problem with the pacing. I feel like it's sort of dragging. So kind of where I'm at, something big happened, and the main character is having to figure out how to fix it, go to the person who has the thing that's supposed to fix the problem. And it just felt like it took forever for them to get there, and I didn't really get much out of the journey. I don't hate it, there's nothing super wrong with it, but I'm not really in love with it either. But I'm only halfway through, so maybe the other half of the book will make up for it. We'll kind of see where it goes. Hopefully I can get to a little bit of making politics tonight. And honestly, I've been having an itch to actually read The Midwinter Witch. I've been wanting to read it for a long time. But I did go through a number of graphic novels earlier in the month, and I think maybe I want to go back to that a little bit. I think it's just because I enjoyed them so much and I'm not been feeling the YA. Honestly, a part of me wonders if I should just stop doing audiobooks, or at least YA audiobooks, because a lot of them are really disappointing. Earlier this month, I listened to Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens, and it just wasn't great. There were actually some big problems with that. Last month, 2 of the 3 YA audiobooks that I listened to just weren't very good, or I was kind of disappointed with in one way or another. And I don't think that it's the format of audiobook altogether, because I loved Sing Unburied Sing. I loved Ghost Boys. But I think I've just been picking poor books, I guess, to listen to. To clarify, I've been listening to it on audiobook, and I also have the Kindle version, so I've been listening some, and then reading along with it. We'll see how this goes. Hopefully it'll pick back up. Did you want to say hi to you? No, you just wanted love.
So it is about 10:30 on the 23rd, 10:30 at night, clearly. Last night I did not end up reading more of Moving Politics, and I didn't get a chance to read that much this morning because I think that I've completely messed up my sleeping schedule. I did wake up at 11, worked on a video, took a nap at 2, and didn't wake up until 6. So that's my life right now. But I just started reading The Midwinter Witch. I'm already obsessed. So I've already read the first 2 books, and the first 2 books were really adorable, but you know, I don't know if I paid attention to the dedication of the other ones, so I'll have to go back and see them. But the dedication alone, I don't know if we can get that to focus. The dedication made me, like, tear up. So I don't know what my problem is. I think the problem might be that I'm a water sign, like, in multiple ways. So, anyways, kind of going into the book, I'm really excited about it. I'm only about 30 pages in, but it's really apparent that 2 characters like each other, I think, and I really hope that it happens. It's literally the cutest. I'm super stoked for this, and I have a feeling that I'm probably just gonna want to reread the whole series and probably do a whole review video on it. I don't really need to reread the series because I have read it pretty recently, but I think I'll want to. So that's where I am. Chances are I'll probably end up reading the rest of this just kind of in one sitting, so I will check back in when I'm done with that.
It is finally not raining outside, so I am sitting out here reading. I just finished A Blade So Black, and I've got to say the end definitely did pick up. I actually felt like emotional connection to the characters, which I hadn't really been feeling as much the rest of the book, which is weird because usually I get a little bit too invested. Yeah, the end definitely picked up. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to be reading the sequel or not. As I was reading it, I tended to get a little bit lost as to who was in the room, which might just be me because I am having some concentration problems. I'm going to get into some slightly spoilery territory here for a minute, so I'll put the timestamp where that ends. so that you don't have to listen to that. I really doubt that I will end up reading the sequel, largely because of the romance that ends up happening. I just can't deal with mentor-mentee relationships for the most part, and I really can't do the, centuries old, almost immortal or actually immortal person with a teenager trope. I used to be able to read some of that. When I was in high school, I was a fan of Twilight. There was another vampire series that I really liked that had some things in it that were maybe like that. But honestly, as an adult, like as a 27-year-old, I don't think that I could even fathom dating someone who is 18 or 19. So the idea of being 300 years old or whatever and trying to date a 17-year-old is just kind of disgusting. I mean, if you're okay with reading that, like, that's you, but I just personally can't do that. Yeah, I think that's the only spoilery thing I'm going to mention. I have other thoughts, but I'll just kind of leave it at that. Overall, I would say this wasn't a bad book. I definitely had critiques. There was nothing that stood out as, like, super problematic or anything like that. So I'd say it's maybe a 3-star read, like an ambivalent 3-star read. I wasn't super stoked about a whole lot in it, but it also wasn't terrible. So yeah, I'm probably gonna spend a decent chunk of the day reading more of Moving Politics out here. I also kind of want to do a few other things though too. I brought a few other things out here to work on. I've got my reading journal that I'll probably write in. So yeah, I will check back in at the end of the day.
All right, it is about 9 o'clock on the last day that I'll be doing the readathon. I'm almost to the end of page 150 in Moving Politics, which is about 25 pages away from the end of part 2. I might get a little bit more further in, but I'm not too sure. I had some other things that I would like to do tonight. The main focus in the chunk of the book that I've been reading since last time has been about really the big thing that made everything shift from respectability politics being at the center of most activism to direct action being at the center. A lot of it had to do with various political things that were happening within the government. She specifically cites Bowards versus Hardwick, which was a Supreme Court ruling that said that it was constitutional to ban gay sex, like they specified within it homosexual sodomy. So it was specifically attacking them. And they actually used religious and moral reasoning within the ruling, which shouldn't be surprising, but it still kind of is kind of shocking. That, alongside a bunch of other things that were going on in one of the big cities in California, I think they were trying to, or there was a group of people who were trying to get on the ballot a quarantining initiative for people with AIDS or people suspected to have AIDS. So people felt attacked by that, as well as employment discrimination that was happening and laws that allowed employment discrimination for or against people with HIV. So all of that together pushed people. And she's been talking about some of the specifics of how exactly that happened, the wording that people used, the role that the media played, specifically gay media. So it's really fascinating. As I'm reading this whole thing, all the time when I'm learning new facts about different social movements that I feel are really important, I get a little bit mad too that I didn't already know this. Like, nobody told me what Bowers versus Hardwick was. I had no idea about it until I read this, and I was highly involved in LGBT organizations. We talked about the 2003, I could totally be wrong on that, I'll have to look that up, but the ruling that made anti-sodomy laws unconstitutional that happened in the 2000s, we mentioned that, we talked about that. Granted, it was in the context of making a trivia game and doing a trivia game, but nobody ever talked about this one, and I was always under the assumption that, oh, well, that ruling was because all of these laws were put in like the 1800s, and sure, people used them to discriminate against people in the 70s, but I mean, certainly that didn't happen anymore. But seeing those laws like validified in like 1986, like that's wild. I don't know, go learn about some history that you didn't know before, teach your kids comprehensive history. That's basically what's on my mind while reading this. Hopefully I'll get to finish part 2, but like I said, I have other stuff that I want to do. I'll mention it in the wrap-up if I do get to it, but that's what I've got. So that was the Zodiacathon. To wrap up a little bit, I will cover the books that I read, what prompt they went with, and the rating that I ended up giving them. First, I had A Blade So Black, which covered my zodiac prompt. I'm a Pisces and Lilith, so I had to read a book that was not in our world. It also was my buddy read with someone of the same sign. I buddy read this with Elle, who, like I said, I met on the Zodiacathon Twitter page. I will put her Twitter and Instagram page in the description. I gave this kind of ambivalent 3 stars. I had a couple of hang-ups with it, nothing super problematic. It just wasn't really my thing with some of the details. The next book that I totally finished was The Midwinter Witch. That covered, I want to say, technically, the mostly black cover prompt, and also definitely dark themes, because it does deal with things like homophobia, and also, I think, stuff like depression and self-doubt as well. I gave this book 5 stars. I gave this whole series 5 stars, if you want to look at a more comprehensive review on that, especially since I kind of forgot to do the wrap-up when I finished this. I'll post that link for you. And the final book I did not finish, but I started for this, and that is Moving Politics by Deborah Gould. This obviously fits the prompt for black cover, but I would say this also covers dark themes like homophobia and indifference to justice, which also fits in with prompt number 5, which is something that scares you. This really does terrify me. Terrifies may be the wrong word. It's more of a mix of anger and sadness. Still dark emotions, even if it's not scared. Anyways, we don't need to get super deep into that. We're not gonna cry today, at least not right now. I think that once I get through with Moving Politics, I'm probably gonna do a whole video on it. At the very least, a review video. I've also considered maybe doing a video where I break it down a little bit, especially since this is an academic text. It's not super accessible. If you'd be interested in either of those, let me know down below. If nothing else, I'm definitely going to be putting a video together of books that are on this topic or similar topics at some point in the future, probably after I read a few more things, so it's kind of long term to look out for, I suppose. The prompts that I didn't get to, the only one that I didn't hit was a morally gray character, which I think that it depends on your definition of morally gray as to whether there were any in these books, because there were some like bad guys who might seem like they might be good or have some sort of charm to them, but I don't think that's really morally gray, to be honest. So that is all for the Zodiacathon. I really enjoyed vlogging. I think probably because I don't get to talk to people a whole lot about the stuff that I'm reading. I also really enjoyed the buddy read because of that as well. If you have read any of these books, let me know what you thought about them in the comments. If you participated in the Zodiacathon, let me know what you read. And if you plan on participating in any other readathons, let me know what they are. As always, thank you so much for watching. Bye!